check. Yep, okay, I think I am.
Okay,
I'm here.
Right.
Great.
I mean, I'm not seeing anybody, but I'm here, yep. You can see me.
I can see you, I can hear you.
Thank you.
That's the main thing.
Okay, ready to go.
So good evening, everybody, and welcome to another lockdown lecture from Harif. This, I believe, is our 37th lockdown lecture since the crisis began. For those who don't know Harif, we are the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa. You don't need to be one, you just need to be interested in that part of the world. We have a website, www.harif.org. Please do subscribe if you're not already on our mailing list. We also have a sister website called Point of No Return, which keeps you up to date with the news. This session is being live streamed to Facebook, to the Harif Facebook page, and we will also be doing a recording of it, and it'll be available on YouTube in due course. If you have any questions, please do type them in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And I think that's all for housekeeping. So we'll move on to the subject of tonight's talk, which is the 4th century synagogue of Apamea in Syria. And Syria, as you know, had one of the oldest Jewish communities going back to biblical times. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce our speaker tonight, Adam Blitz. Adam is an archaeologist of the Near East and Mediterranean, and he has done extensive research into the Roman and Byzantine Empire with field work in the Middle East and Europe. And his achievements are really too numerous to mention, but he's also an accredited journalist. So without further ado, I will hand over to you, Adam.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I don't believe I'm screen sharing at the moment. Is that correct? I think you're just seeing me.
Able to screen share if you want to.
Yes, now you can.
Thank you. So are you seeing the title page?
We are.
Okay, because, okay, that's encouraging because I mean, I've closed my presenter view. So great. Okay, well then I will start. So yes, shalom, salam, willkommen, benvenuto. I have closed my presenter view, so I have no idea who is out there other than the Chinese. So I would just like to thank Lynn and Harif for this opportunity. As we're back in lockdown, at least in London, these virtual events are all the more important. So I hope you will enjoy the next hour or so, which I realize is mealtime for many of you. So I hope you will indulge and imbibe as I share with you the Digital Apamea project, in which photogrammetry and other technologies are employed to reconstruct a tessellated Byzantine floor from 4th century Syria. What I propose is to introduce the site, offer a potted history of the city of Apamea, the history of excavations, and in particular the synagogue excavations and its donor inscriptions, which should be understood within the context of late antique Judaism and Christianity in transition. I will discuss the stylistics of the synagogue mosaics, the skill required, for mosaic execution, and the pitfalls of archaeological intervention, before highlighting some issues and proposed resolutions with virtual restoration and virtual reality, VR technology. So off to Syria. we should be moving.
It's about 10 to 15 second delay normally between you clicking and me getting it.
Shall I try again?
Mm-hmm.
Nope. Okay. I don't know what's happened. I'm sorry, Lynn, I don't know what's happened. It just worked.
Go back into PowerPoint and restart the presentation again.
Okay.
I'll stop sharing. I'll stop you sharing and start the PowerPoint again and start sharing again, I think.
Hopefully it's going to work this time. Here we go.
Yes.
Yes, we are off to Syria. The Syrian city of Apamea, is located on the Orontes or Assi River, which meets the Mediterranean near ancient Antioch, present-day Antakya. Apamea is located near the cities of Hama, Homs, and is approximately 130 kilometers south of Aleppo. Apamea exists today as the modern town of Kalat al-Mudik and the archaeological park. Apamea actually consists of two cities, the colonnaded Hellenistic Roman city in the plain, which was just on your left-hand side, and the citadel or the tell of Kalat al-Mudik, which has just come into view, whence the modern town takes its name. I should add, it is substantially more verdant than the black and white image you just saw. These two images from the 30s help to illustrate the formation of the tell. Fast forward 80 years, and the recent history of Apamea has not been kind. 2011, the start of the uprising in the Syrian civil war. Kalat al-Mudik is shelled after a short insurgency, which I should add is not connected to IS. And then the lower city falls victim to the worst illegal excavations and looting of any site in the Syrian Arab Republic. Thousands of potholes scar the ground and destroy the stratigraphy. By way of comparison, on the left-hand side, Apamea, just at the start of the conflict, but unaffected. And then on the right-hand side, that's just over a year later into the conflict. Strictly speaking, the Syrian conflict is not relevant for today's discussion. That the stratigraphy has been irreparably destroyed is of relevance for future excavations. However, the focus of today's talk is on the synagogue mosaics, which were unearthed and detached in 1934, just shy of 80 years before the conflict began in 2011. The genesis of Apamea is typically associated with the unified Syrian tetrapolis, literally 4 cities, and Alexander's general Seleucus, who sought to militarize the city. This he did with elephants, hundreds of war elephants. But Apamea is substantially older than Seleucus and his wife, Apamea, the city's namesake. Strabo, the Greek historian, informs us of a Hellenistic military settlement referred to as Pella, and Persian sources cite Charasanos or Pharnaki. Archaeology is also instrumental. It uncovers a greater peerage with a Hittite or Alluvian stele from Kalat al-Mudik, now in the Aleppo Museum. And this mentions a king, or Helena, who claims to have founded the city, or at least the tell, in 850 CE. Further, the discovery of flint in the sondages on the tell conducted by Dominique Coulon in the 1960s support a date of at least a Neolithic settlement. That is at least 4,500 years before Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, the Roman general Pompey, annexed the city to Rome in 64 BC and proceeded to raze it. It is during this latter rebuild of the late Roman and subsequent Byzantine control that the town acquired its riches and familiar colonnaded streets. As for the Jews, we don't know when the first communities were established, but in Bellum Judaicum, the Jewish War, Josephus tells us that in response to reprisals of the Jewish revolt of 66 to 70 CE, the Apameans were spared. And the narrative is really, really gripping. The other cities rose up against the Jews that were among them. Those of Ashkelon slew 2,500, Ptolemais 2,000, and put not a few into bonds. Those of Tyre also put a great number to death. Those of Hippos, Gadara, did likewise put to death the boldest of the Jews, but kept those whom they were afraid of in custody, as did the rest of the cities of Syria. Only the Antiochians, Sidonians, Apameans spared those who dwelt with them and would not endure either to kill any of the Jews or put them in bonds. So this would be a first century date, as is the case of the bilingual ossuary inscription that the Ariston inscription from the Academa convent tombs near Abu Tur, which mentions an Ariston from Apamea, Yehuda the proselyte, who may in fact be the same Ariston mentioned in the Mishnah, who brings the first fruits, the pilgrimage rites of Bikurim, to the temple in Jerusalem from Apamea, but not via the Baltic or some other sea, as this other map would suggest. This is actually not his ossuary. I only had a black and white image, but that of his daughter, who was also buried in the same tomb. Back in Apamea, there are other traces, and I will explain to you about these two images because there is a story behind them at a later date. But let me ask you, can you see anything? I know you can't respond because you've all been muted, but can you see anything? Well,
yes, I can, but I'm cheating a bit.
You're cheating, okay. Okay, well, let me give you a clue. Can you see the menorah?
Yeah.
And the lulav?
Yes.
So here you have the original portal, a close-up of the scratching, and then my markup of it with the menorah in red and the lulav in yellow. The site of Apamea has undergone extensive excavations by the Belgian authorities, the Mission Archaeologique Belge, for the best part of 80 years. First under Ferdinand Mayence, and then when excavations recommenced in the 60s, under Jean-Charles Balti, who you're seeing at this very time, in action. As for the synagogue, it was during the fourth season of excavations in 1934, when the foundations of a 120 meter square mosaic floor came to light, intertwined with two latter basilicae of the Grand Atrium Church off the Cardo Maximus and the Decumanus leading to the amphitheater. And I've marked it in blue on the image on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side of this image, you will see Jean-Charles Balti's plan of the atrium church, significantly more detailed than Henri Lacoste's from the earlier excavations. And the synagogue is in yellow, and the outer walls of the atrium church are marked in purple. The mosaics were exceptionally well preserved, and this is one of two panoramic photos surviving. The archive was destroyed in a fire in 1946 that engulfed the Belgian Museum. What the image reveals is that the synagogue consisted of several rooms and was subdivided into 24 sections of mosaics and inscribed panels or stone carpets, as Eliezer Sukenik, the father of the emergent Israeli school of archaeology, referred to them. This is an image of the latter structures, the two basilicae built on top of the other 15 centimeters apart, with opus sectile tiles being the last stratum. And if you look in the apse, that's actually the synagogue mosaic. Unlike the co-religionists at Dura Europos with its gloriously painted walls, the Jews of Apamea adhered to a more literalist interpretation of the second commandment regarding graven images. Instead, we find geometric forms, of which I will say more. I'm just trying to pull that up there for you. A small menorah is the only incontrovertible Jewish symbol. I actually think there's the lulav as well, but again, I will discuss that with you shortly. In the time of the most illustrious Archisynagogai Eusebius, Nemius, and Phineas, and the Gerusiarch Theodorus, and the most illustrious presbyter Isaacos, Saulus, and the others, Iasos, Archisynagogus of the Antiochians, made the entrance mosaic 150 feet in the year 703, the seventh day of the month, Audaneos, blessings upon all. We know from the donor inscription that you see before you that the synagogue was established in 391, 392 of the Common Era, that's the Gregorian calendar, according to the reference year of 703 in the Seleucid calendar. We also learn of a very well-structured, organized body, the office holders, 3 archisynagogai and the leaders, the archisynagogus. This is a term employed only in the Greco-Roman period. We learn of the Gerusiarch Theodorus, the president of the community, as well as the leaders of the Antiochians, Iasos, Jason, who dedicated the entrance mosaic. And there is a strong relationship between Apamea and the great city of Antioch. Iasos, son of Isaacos, archisynagogus of the Antiochians, for the welfare of Photius, his wife, and of their children, and for the welfare of Eustasia, his mother-in-law, and memory of Isaacos, Edesios, and Heskios, his ancestors, made the mosaic of the entrance, peace and mercy upon all your holy people. And here again, we learn of Iasos, his lineage, his wife, his children, his mother-in-law, and the rationale for the inscription. And what we see is that it's actually in tesserae that the donors gained recognition for their generosity within the community. Competition between donors is evident as the elite render vows and petition for soteria, salvation. And this zeal also manifests itself in the value of the mosaics, units ranging from 50 to 100 feet, but also in their location, for example, by an entranceway for all to witness. And women make up over 40% of the inscriptions. And before you, these are some of the exclusively female donation inscriptions. So we hear about Alexandra in fulfillment of a vow for the welfare of her family. She makes 100 feet. Ambrosia, 50. Domitilla, I think it's Domitilla, it's just indicates Dom, 100. Eupisthus, 100. Diogenes, 100. And there's also the theory that many of the women may in fact have been proselytes. We know that Judaism did in fact attract non-Jews, pagans, despite some of the harsh rhetoric of the bishops Ambrose and Chrysostom. But all of this needs to be seen in the context of late antiquity in transition. Though still a religio licta, Judaism's relationship with the Byzantine Church was different from late Roman rule. The roots of divergence lie in the Edict of Milan, 313 CE, and the tolerance afforded to Christianity. It is no longer a persecuted faith. Thereafter, in 325, when the Council of Nicaea advances its orthodoxy of a single Godhead, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, equal in part, Christianity becomes altogether muscular, and schismatic movements such as Arianism, with its rejection of the Trinity, struggle. The imperial capital moves to Constantinople, Nova Roma, Nea Roma. And then by 380, the Emperor Theodosius I prescribes Christianity as a state religion at the Council of Thessaloniki. Now Judaism and paganism begin to acquire an altogether ambiguous role. Both are vital for a supersessionist church, despite their defiance of Nicene dogma. Events turn ugly when an angry mob burns down the synagogue in Callinicum, which is modern-day Raqqa, al-Raqqa. But the Jews of Apamea are wholly unaffected, it would appear. In 391, 392, they found their synagogue. It is short-lived. The archaeological evidence indicates that the first phase of the building of the Grand Atrium Church is only a few decades away, in about 415, 420 CE, in which case the synagogue has existed for barely 20 years. This date corresponds with textual evidence for the resurgence of anti-Jewish polemic at Imistar, which Socrates Scholaticus informs us about. Imistar is close to Apamea. It's circumstantial. It's not clear whether the events at Imistar result in the destruction of a sacred site at Apamea. But we do know that other synagogues at Antioch and Rabat Moab, Al-Rabba, ancient Areopolis in Jordan, were destroyed by the radical monk Bar Salma within a few years of each other. We also read about the destruction and conversion of pagan sites and their determination to quell the oracle of Zeus Belus at Apamea by Bishop Marcellus. He laid waste to all of the temples in and around Apamea on the Orontes in northwestern Syria several decades before. But more critical for this discussion, the Emperor Theodosius II is petitioned by the Bishop Ambrose not to rebuild the Antiochian synagogue, which would indicate that there were indeed protections in place such that a bishop could challenge the status quo. Unfortunately, the Codex Theodosianus, published in 438 but enacted earlier, provides a very ambivalent picture. And this is a major debate for scholars of Judaism and late antiquity. And those who study Christian polemical text and the archaeology of diaspora synagogues. The latter may or may not demonstrate intentional and violent destruction, but repurposing and alteration or some expression of appropriation in varying degrees. And this is where I believe the skills of a mosaic scholar are essential. Much has been made of the assumption of damnatio memoriae, that the synagogue floor was intentionally interred to bury the past as an act of erasure, the same way we find on statues. That names are excised. One of the notable conclusions on the part of Eliezer Sukenik is that the synagogue floor was not recycled, as he put it. But increasingly, I'm asking, is this factor relevant? I showed you several slides ago an instance in which the Christian basilica are stratified and lie on top of one another. And in fact, we see this practice throughout the Roman and Byzantine world. I mean, I've yet to come across examples of any substantial recycling, so to speak. I mean, I know of some wall mosaics from Duras in Albania being reused, but this is very different from what Sukenik has suggested. Moreover, there are approximately 20 diaspora synagogues, the majority of which are later than Apamea. But the sequencing from a synagogue to a Christian place of worship is much more localized than the texts and the decrees would have us believe. Yes, Theodosius does concede to Ambrose, and yes, there is a prohibition about rebuilding synagogues. But the synagogues at, for example, Sardis or Bova Marina in Calabria, and the recent scholarship on Gerasa, Jerash in Jordan, do not indicate that these synagogues were abandoned because of the violent rhetoric of the church fathers and a close reading of the Theodosian Code. There are other explanations for demise and abandonment. And this is certainly not the picture with the Galilean synagogues. There is an abundance of highly decorated Palestinian synagogues in the latter 5th, 6th, and 7th centuries. So whereas the archaeological evidence at Apamea may support a date of circa 420, the demise of the synagogue, we cannot say that it was violently destroyed, and I emphasize violently. The evidence of cinders suggests cleaning rather than full-scale combustion. I would expect to see more devastation if this were violently destroyed. So perhaps this is more a case of the synagogue being intentionally dismantled and the interment of the floor as a practical consequence of tessellation. Well, as I mentioned about the stylistics, the iconography of the Apamea mosaics are very much in the Antiochian tradition, and the one on the right is from Antioch. It doesn't have the menorah, as you can see on the left, but you have the characteristic ombre, the trompe d'oeil, the illusionary geometric motifs, the abundance of the yellow limestone, and have a look here. And also at the arc-en-ciel, the rainbow mosaics that so define this period and the Antioch school. But as befits so much of early 20th century excavations in the Near East at this time, the early excavators sliced and diced the mosaics and divided them between Syria and Belgium, where the Grande Salle d'Apamea was designated to reflect the imperial aspirations of King Leopold II of Belgium before the fire. And you can see the mosaics on the bottom underneath the giant mosaic with the animals, almost in the center of the page. But slicing and dicing is not so straightforward as you probably know. I mean, what lies beneath? Mosaics are the result of a stratified process. The author Vitruvius and Pliny the Elder describe the methods for the installation of mosaic pavements. First, the ground was prepared by digging while the surface was leveled and beaten. Then the foundation levels were created, the statumen, the thick layer with rubble, the rudus, approximately 20 centimeters thick with broken stones mixed with lime, the nucleus, approximately 12 centimeters thick of powdered brick and lime. Thereafter, the mosaicist painted guides in either red, black, or yellow, before a very thick bedding layer called the sopranucleus of approximately 8 millimeters was spread with lime and a volcanic ash mixture. And it's in this final stage that the tesserae can be pressed down and grouted with sifted marble powder, lime and sand. And then lastly, the surface is polished with pumice and beeswax. The classical sources also tell us about the daily wages offered, as set out in Diocletian's Edictum de Pretes Rerorum Venalium, or the Edict on Maximum Prices. Unskilled workers who prepared the foundations were paid 50 to 60 sesterces, but the pictor imaginarius who drew the actual cartoon, he received 175. And the image you see before you is actually of mosaicists preparing tesserae from the museum in Ostia. All of this social history is lost if you remove the bedding layers, if you hack off the bedding layers to adorn the mosaics on a wall, as with portraiture, or to embed them in a totally foreign substrate. The use of concrete, and in particular the metal render, is detrimental to mosaics. It expands, it contracts, it absorbs salt and the like, and the structure deteriorates. And here you can see where the tessellated surface has cracked in response. And this image is from the museum in Damascus. This is actually outside in the archaeological garden. But fundamentally, both the desire to adorn or to embed is to erase the past, because these mosaics were never designed to be viewed at eye level, but to catch our gaze. It's more of a wink. It's a wink more than a stare, and to bear weight as part of an ambulatory experience. So that's when I began to think how I might respond. There are problems. The scientific study of Apamea is steeped in a host of challenges, notably the paucity of information after the catastrophic fire and the reliance on preliminary reports and a handful of black and white photographs. And that's just where photogrammetry fits in, the science of making images from photographs. If the scale of an image is known, the distance or length of objects can be easily calculated by measuring the distance on the photo and multiplying it by the scale. Well, I had photographs and measurements of the mosaics from Damascus. This is from Damascus, as I did from Brussels. And if you look on the image on your left-hand side, you can see the mosaics hanging on a partition, a wall, on the furthest right of the left-hand side image. What I didn't have was materials in the case of a now lost fragment, which I believe to be a Bema mosaic, and that is where Adobe Photoshop's technology proved to be very useful. So what you see before you is entirely reconstructed based on some tremendously encrusted photos, which were incomplete. I can just go back there and you can see how those two images align. But basically, the two rosettes were duplicated, I think, 12 or 13 times. I would have to count now, forgive me. But this was then colorized by hand based on comparanda of other mosaics from the region. But there were other challenges with the existing mosaics in different locations and at different stages of preservation and conservation, to include one mosaic which was in the storeroom, which had not been seen in decades because it was over 3 meters long and it was faced to the wall. And here you can see, again, it's a composite image. This is made up of 4 pieces, 4 fragments. And there was a huge amount of lost tesserae, such that it was actually quite difficult to join it together. But there was also the issue of nomenclature not only were these corpora in Damascus and Brussels referenced and inventorized differently, but they're referred to differently in publications devoted to texts as opposed to archaeology. And the fragments haven't been united since 1934. So I decided to rotate the composite floor such that the majority of the Greek inscriptions could be read more easily and from left to right. I also decided to simplify the referencing such that you now have registers, register 1, register 2, the R numbers, and that you have columns, column 1, column 2, and within that you have sections. And I must apologize actually about the resolution of this image, because I mean, I'm normally working to a much, much higher resolution. And I'm sorry, the image that you previously saw was a prototype. But there's still the nagging question about the next step. How about VR, virtual reality? How about an app, an immersive sensation? A prototype with game engine technology in which you might approximate the experience of walking on the reconstructed floor. Well, I'm sure you've heard it said, when is a door not a door? To which the reply is, when it is ajar. So let me ask you, when is a floor not a floor? When it is upon a wall. This is actually a threshold. This inscription tells of Nehemiah the Hazan, but this is most definitely something that is so associated with being on the floor such that you step over it. And there you can see it on the top right hand of your screen. So I'd like to share with you an illusion, because the how affects the what we see. And this is a prototype, subject to funding. It'll be developed and advanced, but it gives you an idea of the ambulatory experience of walking on the floor, the sense of scale, and the sense of unity with the mosaics. So if I may now leave you with a glimpse of what is yet to come, the digital Apamea exhibition at some point in 2021, which will appear at Exeter University Street Gallery and the Institute of Arabic and Islamic Studies, for which I'm immensely grateful. And of course, you are all very much invited.
Okay, Adam, is that finished?
It is indeed finished. It is indeed finished. Hopefully bang on 45 minutes.
Well, well done, Adam.
So now I can increase my gallery view, can I not?
Yes, you can
So-
Well, I've
come
taken
out of your
screen share, and I'll take the spotlight video off you as well now. You're no longer in the spotlight.
Okay.
Okay.
So that was a magnificent achievement to reconstruct that floor. From
Sorry, I'm just trying to leave my screen share.
I've left
Okay.
it. You've left it.
I've left it.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yes, indeed, I have left it.
Now see
Yes.
you full screen.
Yes. So now I see you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, that was quite an achievement. Going on very little, you've managed to reconstruct the whole thing.
Well, it isn't actually the whole thing, because what I didn't mention was that what I have reconstructed is the consensus of what exists in terms of the floor. The synagogue does actually extend beyond what you saw. There are at least 3 mosaics, only one of which we know the location of, which is in Damascus. You did see an image of it in the presentation, but it's the one that's very yellow with the zigzag. That I haven't included as of yet. I will deal with the issue of the greater synagogue, but there isn't any consensus on that. I mean, I think I do know the form of the greater synagogue to include those 3 other inscriptions, but I did not include them in the presentation that you saw. So,
Right.
so I'm being brutally honest with you.
If there are any questions, please do write them in the chat.
You've had one. Is
Yeah.
it in is it in Exeter, and when is it going to start?
Yeah, so your exhibition will be in Exeter, will it?
It will be in Exeter. I mean, in fact, it's been in like 4 different locations already, but and I'm sorry, I don't know who asked the question. At this very time, we, at least in London, are back in a hard lockdown. So everything is particularly disruptive now. So it should be 2021.
Yes, but of course everything is up in the air.
I know, everything is up in the air, and it keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back, and everything else gets pushed back.
Yes, of course.
At Exeter as well. Okay. So
I think
but there is a I'm sorry.
Yes. No, sorry. That question was actually from Etty. Yeah. So normally it would be in Exeter, all being well, and once we're out of this crisis.
Yes. So it should be. I think we're talking about May, but I'm not entirely confident with that. That's what we were talking about last year. So assuming everything gets pushed back. I mean, all the other exhibitions in advance of this one get pushed back.
Right.
So I'm not entirely hopeful, but I am working on the catalogue, so you may at least be able to see the catalogue.
Right, that's
yes.
Great. Question from Jackie. Why were the names of the donors of the synagogue so Hellenized and the language in Greek?
Because they were
Hellenized Jews.
They were indeed. I mean, this mode of thinking between, you know, this sort of binary opposition is really not very accurate. I mean, okay, in Sardis, you do have some inscriptions in Hebrew, but you find, I mean, synagogue inscriptions in Hebrew, but the vast majority of them, I think it's 50 of them, are in Greek. So yes, these ones are indeed in Greek, and I'm sure they were Greek speaking.
Right. Were these converts then to Judaism, or were they?
Some of them may have been.
Right.
Some of them may have been. We don't know. I mean, the synagogue is very large. I mean, it's. I mean, to give you a sense of scale, it's sort of between like a third and a quarter the size of like an Olympic swimming pool.
Gosh.
So I mean, it is actually quite large. I mean, we don't have benches, so we don't, you know, it's very difficult to estimate the size, but I mean, the city of Apamea was absolutely enormous. I mean, it was over 100,000 when the census was taken. I can't remember exactly when. And then those are only citizens, so it's not including slaves. So we're talking about a city which was probably somewhere around the 5th or the 6th largest at that time. You know, it's not as big as Rome, it's not as big as Antioch, it's not a Constantinople. But it may be approximating Ephesus, so it's a very, very big city. So,
well, we have a question here from Kirsche Gemligen.
so where is this? I'm sorry.
Yes, I think it's a place.
No, it's a person.
No, it's a
I've
person.
asked the person to unmute.
Yes, yes.
Kirsche,
Adam, it's me, Christoph.
Yes,
Hallo Christoph, guten
Hi.
Abend und vielen Dank. I must mention that the gentleman you are seeing in front of you,
yes.
First of all, he is my hero on a number of occasions because he also helped me with another synagogue that you know all too well, beginning with J. But the Apamea inscription, and this is the story, I must thank you. First of all, Christoph took the photograph of the etching of the menorah and the lulav, what, in 1995, something like that?
1992.
1992.
1992.
Well, I can tell you now, as of a few hours, I have identified where that is. Because when we were having discussions about this, I had heard that you couldn't remember where it was, and the colonnade in Apamea, to tell the audience, is you know, the best part of 2 kilometers long. It's very, very, very long.
You know, tonight I really recognized where it is when you gave your presentation, because it was absolutely clear that it's exactly at that corner where you showed the size of the synagogue.
Okay, because, thank you, because a few hours ago, I just purchased an image which showed the complete structure with the columns in it.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, great, we can establish where this is. This is definitely in the south, is it the southwest? In the residential section, and it is actually very, very close to the actual synagogue.
So it's
I mean, the atrium church, church.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It is extremely close because that section of Apamea where you actually have a preponderance of churches, before that you did have monumentally large villas. So yes, so I was getting very excited about this about 4 hours ago, and I wanted to contact you and say, okay, hooray, I have found this. This is unique. Nobody knows of your image. It's never, well, it has been published by me, I'm sorry, but it hasn't been published and broadcast more extensively than, well, I guess that
you know,
video of the exhibition is on YouTube.
As I told you, when my colleagues of the excursion 1992 didn't believe me that this is a menorah. They absolutely said, no, this is not possible. It's just impossible to have a menorah at that position. And Christoph Markschies, the famous professor in Berlin, was with us, and he didn't believe it. Then, maybe now, I don't know.
Well, unfortunately, there's been quite a lot of disbelief, not about this, but about some other sites that are in fact synagogues, and some of it does have to do with the political repercussions where you do not see mention of it actually in the reports, but they will be otherwise honest with you when you were in discussion with them. I mean, for starters, Balti's plan of the synagogue doesn't even include the Torah niche.
Okay.
No. I mean, and it may have been an oversight. It may simply have been an oversight because it subsequently is referred to in the actual text, but it's not on the plan.
But can I just ask you, Adam,
Yes.
did they deliberately ignore the fact there was a menorah there because they didn't want to admit that there was that it was a Jewish site, or what?
No, I don't think so, because first of all, and this is why I really think the photograph is quite miraculous, it is very difficult to see these scratchings. It depends upon how the light is going to catch the graffiti. And in fact, you know, when I was just looking at that image, I thought, oh gosh, you can actually see the chisel marks in the stone still. So I am wondering how you discovered it, Christoph, but you did, you managed to see it, and you might not have seen it on a cloudy day, for example. You really might not.
You know, I can check my diary and maybe I find the exact date and the time.
Well, you sent me your diary because I was looking through our emails. You sent me you wrote a diary, I think for your church, where you were indicating all the sites that you had visited.
No, it was just for me, this diary, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Yeah.
So I think I do know the exact date then that photograph was taken. I mean, of course, that photograph is analog, isn't it? It's before digital.
Of course, yes. It's a slide.
Yes. Yes. So, yes, so I am absolutely delighted. And yes, you have helped me with other synagogues as well. And I'm delighted to see you.
So do I.
Vielen Dank, yeah.
So thanks Zoom for bringing us all together.
That's
yeah,
right.
I mean, I mean, I should explain that Christoph is actually in Bern.
Okay, isn't that wonderful?
So somebody from Switzerland.
Fantastic. We are international, we know. Okay,
yes.
Another question from Beatrice Leal.
Hello, Beatrice. Yes. We have yet to meet.
Which country is she in? Okay. Do any of the mosaic inscriptions give the names of the mosaicists, or are they all donors?
That's a very good question. I mean, we have seen instances where you do know who the mosaicist is, but not here. They are just donors. Right. So thank you for that.
And she thanks you for a fascinating talk. Which
thank you. How is it I'm not able to see people when they are, I don't know, are people able to see me when I'm speaking?
Yes.
No, I mean, because like when Christoph was speaking, suddenly he appeared, you know, in full screen.
I gave him a spotlight view when he was speaking. I can't see Beatrice's picture. She's not got a picture showing.
Oh, okay, maybe she's turned off the video, okay.
Yes, okay, I'll spotlight her picture right now.
Ah, okay, well.
Okay, Beatrice.
Hello, Beatrice.
Hello, thank you.
And I'll unmute you as well.
So,
sorry, take me a second. Oh. 1 second.
In fact, I have your article right here.
Right.
Next to me.
Oh, now we can hear you. Yes.
Hello.
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 So, which country are you in?
I'm in Norwich in the UK.
Oh, in Norwich. Oh gosh.
Well. Yeah, no, I mean that was just it for the question, but yeah, I did want to say thank you very much for the talk. That was fascinating.
No, well, thank you for joining us, and I truly loved your article on the mosaics from the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. And yes, I was a little bit blue when I saw those images, and I just thought how amazingly beautiful it all was there. And then yes.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for joining.
Vanish again. 1 second.
Yes.
So so I am seeing a number of questions. So right, here we go. We've got somebody. Do you think the menorah was included in the church, or was it paved over? No, the whole floor was completely paved over. With the church mosaics, and the menorah did not remain at all. In fact, what they did was they covered the floor with about 15 centimeters, and then they laid another floor directly on top of it. And when you look at the church mosaics, they are, I mean, there are multiple ones because there was a subsequent basilica after that. But when you look at the church mosaics, they're much smaller than the ones that appeared in the synagogue. the ones at the synagogue are about a centimeter square, and the ones for the church are slightly smaller than that. But unfortunately, the whole picture is extremely confused, such that, I mean, I do know which ones are which, but I mean, when you look at some of the images from the museum in Damascus, where the mosaics are kept, there's no differentiation, there's no referencing as to which one is which. When you are in the museum in Brussels, they actually have two galleries as such, but the synagogue mosaics are also combined with the church mosaics, and in a number of instances, they are, the orientation is incorrect, such that they should be displayed vertically when in fact they're horizontal. Sorry, when I say vertically, horizontally. Obviously they should be on the floor, they're not on the floor, but they're displayed incorrectly on the wall.
Right.
As such.
That's the next one.
I've asked Lothar in Trier to unmute.
Ja,
Guten Abend, Herr Schwinden.
guten Abend, Herr Blitz.
Ja,
Here. Oh, here we are. Yeah.
hallo. Grüß dich.
Would you
So-
like to ask your question, Lothar?
He's also one of my heroes because he's helped me with another project. So,
It was interesting to hear you and to see you. It was
well,
nice.
thank you.
I have a question. You have shown the menorah and the colonnade. And I have seen, I believe I have seen below the menorah a graffiti with an inscription of some letter.
Do you know, I have to say that I was wondering that myself. I only, it was only a few hours ago that, and forgive me here, I mean, Christoph sent me that second image of the complete door. He sent that to me several years ago, but it was marked Damascus. So for some reason, if I had looked at it, I couldn't, I mean, the file was marked as Damascus. So I only looked at it a few hours ago. And I thought, goodness gracious, this is it. And I thought, I want to examine it closer and actually, like, you know, throw it into Photoshop and then try some filters or de-stretch and see if I can actually read the inscription. I think there may be an inscription there as well. Now that we know where it's located, perhaps we will find some more information, because I suspect that that house was marked by Balti. And I did try and contact Didier Vivier, the current excavator. Well, I mean, I say the current excavator, the one who followed on from Balti. But I couldn't reach him because it was the holidays. But that is certainly going to be one of the questions that I ask. Do we know what is beneath that? And it does look like there may very well be an inscription. I mean, if you like, I can see if I can pull up that image again. Or rather, I will send it to you after I've tried to manipulate it. I will probably, you know, enlarge the image hugely. I'll throw it onto my light box. I'll see if I can see it any better
Adam,
that
you can
way.
share the screen again now if you want to share it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm still disabled.
No, you're enabled.
No, I'm disabled according to this.
Try again.
So, well,
So, okay, so if I pull this up, and then if I go down to, can you see, what screen are you seeing, by the way?
We've got your PowerPoint screen with all the kind of index of slides on the
yeah,
left.
that's the door.
Yes.
Yeah, the arch.
So I am wondering whether there is an inscription under that as well.
Below the menorah,
Whoops, sorry, I'm
Below the-
below the menorah. Exactly. Let me.
beside the tree or what it is.
Yes, I think so too. Okay, can you see my mouse?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yes, I think so too. But when I was working on the I had the close-up from Christoph, which was the one that I had been working on mostly. But I think you're right. I think there is an inscription going on here, which I'm wondering if this is in Palmyrene or Aramaic. Is that a possibility? It does not look Greek to me.
Greek. Or Greek.
Or Greek? I can't see. To be honest, I can't see it yet. I need to manipulate the image. And I mean, again, you know, the markup that I just did here, I just did that this afternoon. I mean, I had marked it up previously, but then I couldn't find that image.
Christoph thinks it's just the foot of the menorah.
Well, that could be a possibility because of the tripod. Because one of the things that struck me about this menorah is that it's extremely well depicted, as it should be in Exodus, such that you can actually see the you know, the cups and the flames at the top.
Right.
And in the description in Exodus, you're supposed to have the tripod, and you do have three. You definitely have three markings there, but to be honest, I really don't know. I need to manipulate this image. I mean, to be honest, I was just so excited to discover this image today, and to be able to equate that with the door, with the inscription, such that we now know where it is.
Right. Actually, Sonny agrees with you, agrees with Christoph. He thinks it's...
Okay, so I'm sorry, I will stop sharing now.
Yeah, okay. There's a
How
question
do I just stop?
Yeah, just stop.
Yep.
There's a question from Ariel. He asks if there are any Jewish tombs in the vicinity, if any tombs have been found.
I do not know. I'm sorry, I do not know. I know that the synagogue, after it was a church, then had a martyrion, and then much later in life, there was a cemetery there. There are definitely tombs with, I mean, there are burials within it much later in life. I don't know about Jewish tombs in Apamea. I have seen in Palmyra, I have seen some evidence of a menorah from a Jewish tomb, but I do not know about Apamea, but thank you.
And did a Jewish community exist in the area after the synagogue was destroyed, or did all the Jews leave? What happened to them?
Well, first of all, we don't know. The prohibition is against rebuilding the synagogue, that much we know, but there are other communities in existence, maybe not there at Apamea, but for example, you know, Sardis is a classic case of the Jewish community existing and flourishing at a time when other communities are disappearing in some capacity, disappearing from the material record, I should say. But if you look at Jerash, which is not that far away, you know, it's in the north of Jordan, the evidence now is that the synagogue at Jerash was not actually intentionally converted into a church. It becomes a military church, and it becomes repurposed for a totally different reason from, you know, anti-Jewish polemic, if you like. It's completely unrelated. And there are new excavations that are going on in Jerash, not actually on the site of what was referred to as the synagogue church, but in the northwestern corner. However, I was speaking to Rubina Raja, who is conducting the excavations, about 2 weeks ago, and she's hoping someday to extend the excavations to the synagogue, because the mosaics in Jerash are still in the ground. I mean, they've just been preserved.
Right. Okay.
So all we have are black and white photographs from the 30s,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
rather unfortunate.
At least there isn't a war raging in Jordan, and presumably the archaeologists can do their work without any disturbance there.
Well, I mean, remember also, if they do expose the mosaics, then you have to do something with the mosaics, and that often means additional security. You have to build structures to cover them, to protect them from the elements. Or if you then choose to lift them, which you really shouldn't do, but if you choose to lift them, then you have to deal with the whole conservation of them and then put them in a museum and the issue of display. So they are actually safer in the ground.
Actually, there was a question from Marguerite. She asks, what are the materials the mosaics are made of, and are the colors as they would have been originally?
Well, thank you. Most of them are limestone. There is some paste, some sort of glass paste that seems to be used in one of the rosettes. And I am wondering whether there is any glass that's used in the Bima mosaic, because there's a lot of green in that from what I can determine, but I do not know. But they appear to be mostly limestone. And in fact, that yellow limestone is very, very common with Antioch, and it's very definitive, but you don't actually find that in other parts of the Roman Empire as you move, to the same extent as you move west. But it's interesting you should ask about the colors, because there was the fire in the museum such that the mosaics were evidently subjected to heat. And there are still a few that are in the storeroom which haven't been fully conserved. And I was asking this question, whether the heat would actually, and I don't mean oxidization here, would the heat change the chemical composition of the stone and change the color in some capacity? And it was explained to me that yes, that indeed could happen. So for some of the mosaics, we may not be seeing exactly the same color as was the case. And there's also going to be oxidation or patternization that is going on with the mosaics in the museum. And I don't recall them being covered with a lacquer, but that certainly affects the whole appearance of it. In fact, it was the mosaics in Trier that sort of reeked of lacquer, I seem to remember. But in any case, there have been like 3 interventions on the mosaics in Apamea, in Brussels at least. And some of the tesserae have been replaced with very modern stones, or actually tiles. I mean, like, I'm convinced they are ceramic tiles. So that's rather unfortunate, but.
Yeah.
Adam, I've got a question. So many
Yes.
places you go to and find mosaics which are kept in concrete.
Yes.
What do they need to do around the world to preserve them if the concrete is slowly destroying the mosaics?
It is a huge problem, actually, because I mean, what I have seen happen is that they remove the concrete, which is a very, very elaborate process with your angle grinders or the like. They remove the concrete and then they put it on this aluminium honeycomb, which is hugely expensive, but it's lightweight and it's sustainable. So it's actually a very, very expensive process, and it's also risky when you try and take it off of the concrete. But I mean, now the trend is not to touch concrete at all. It is actually to use honeycomb and the aluminium. But
Okay. Well, I'll just see if there are any other questions.
there were some. There's somebody asking about the Jewish tombs,
yes,
the graffiti.
Yes. Yes, we've had that one.
Were there Jews living in the region of this synagogue or only in Aleppo? Well, actually, Aleppo synagogue is later than Apamea. I mean, I think the first inscription is 8th century, but I'm pretty sure the Aleppo synagogue was built on a previous synagogue. I mean, it has the form of a basilica anyway. But no, there were Jewish communities in other parts of Syria, previously Dura Europos, but that was 100 years before. We hear about them in Palmyra, we hear about them in Kalinikam, we hear about them in, I think it's Al-Busira, which I think is close to modern day Deir el-Zur. And in fact, I mean, just the other day, I mean, I was directed to a synagogue up north of Latakia, near, actually very close to what is the port of, and what would be the port of Antioch, the ancient Seleucian Perea. There is actually a late antique synagogue there, again with a church built over it, which is not very well publicized at all. In fact, what I have done is because I was afraid somebody was going to ask, I have prepared a map of diaspora synagogues in the Mediterranean and the Near East. But maybe I should answer other questions rather than get drawn into that.
Well, maybe that will be the subject for another talk.
Well, quite possibly.
Yeah. Okay.
Why did they build a synagogue there? If you mean why did they build a synagogue in Apamea, or why did they specifically build a synagogue off of the Cardo Maximus, the grand colonnade? I mean, it's actually in a very prominent position within the city. I'm almost positive this would be the second synagogue, and beforehand it conforms to a domestic structure in terms of plan, but actually like quite a monumentally large structure. They all seem to be residential in that region. So, I mean, it's a very good location for a synagogue. It's a very wealthy community. So,
yeah, and women were especially prominent by the looks of things.
Women were prominent. Roman women were substantially more prominent than. You want to be a Greek, you want to be a Roman woman, you don't want to be a Greek woman. Yes. Yes.
So yeah, so Ariel is still wondering why.
Sorry, why am I not seeing Ariel? Yeah. Oh, sorry, because it's saying saying messages.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so
no, he's still wondering.
Oh, sorry, and no tombs. I don't know of any of the tombs. I mean, actually, when you look at the excavations, and the excavations at Apamea have been going on for over 100 years. I mean, I think it is the longest running one on the part of the Belgian authorities.
If I can add something, we have a very, very old tradition in our tribes or our people, like Jacobs, that they bring it from Egypt to be burned, to be enterré in Hebron. People from America, from Europe, 3,000 years after, they want to be.
Well, that's definitely.
So it is possible that in this time, people are living there, they have a synagogue, but when they want to be buried, like we say, Vayasef El Amav, he go back with his ancestor, if I can say. So people from one town, it's possible that they go to another tomb to be with a family, because there they are working, business, wealthy people, but for buried, this could be the answer, that they take them in another place where there are other Jews.
Well, I mean, that's definitely the case with Ariston, but Ariston is a lot earlier than the Apamea synagogue. I mean, here you have an actual inscription that mentions he is from Apamea, Ariston of Apamea, Yehuda the proselyte, who then gets buried in Jerusalem in very elaborate tombs, and his two daughters are buried in the tombs as well. So is this a case that they actually migrated and then lived in Jerusalem? Or is this a case that, you know, Ariston was buried there and subsequently his daughters were buried there? I mean, I'm curious to find out about Bet Shearim as well. I mean, maybe there are references. I haven't looked at that. I mean, I've seen, I mean, it's not a Jewish one. Again, it's in Trier. There's a tombstone that indicates that the deceased was from Apamea. You know, one of the arguments about Aquileia being a synagogue, which is contested, is that the donors reference the town in which they came. They have Old Testament names. They reference the town that they came from, and the town is in the vicinity of Apamea. So yes, people do reference where they have come from, whether it's as donors, whether it is ultimately in death as well. So I believe Marguerite wants to ask a question because she just appeared on the screen.
I think she already did, but it's
Yeah,
always nice to see Marguerite.
That was me spotlighting anyone who was looking bright and alert and smiling.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, I'll ask her to unmute.
Marguerite, would you like to say something?
No, she's not unmuted herself.
No.
You had a lovely smile.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yes,
I think on that note we will wrap up, as there aren't any more questions. And Jackie says this is all very gripping stuff.
Thank you.